Jared had to go to a meeting, and he said, "Do you care if my class comes in there?" And I said, "Well, no, because I'm going to just teach the same thing." I mean, I was going to say what I was going to say anyway. So we're glad to have a bigger crowd. And today, I think we could all actually help out with this one because we're doing the 23rd Psalm. Let me get on my page here. But when I think, before I even start that, I just had to say that as soon as I saw that, it made me think of Norris Garner because when he was sick, I went over to visit, and I had called Preacher Farrell, who wasn't even our preacher then, and I asked him, I said, "I want to go over and see Norris, and I wish you'd just tell me something you think I ought to say." And he said, "Well, just say, do you know the Lord is your Savior? Or do you know a time when you accepted the Lord?" And anyway, I was there with Brooke, and I said, "Norris, do you remember when you was young, where'd you go to church?" Because I knew you didn't go to Smyrna till you got with them. And he started telling me about going to revivals and all this stuff at different Robbins, First Baptist, and then he asked, I said, "I'd like to read some scripture with you." And he said, "I'd like to hear the 23rd Psalm." But he didn't just hear it, he said it with me, a lot of it. And I think about how when Sandy was in 4th grade, right, with Miss Flossie? Yeah. And see, I didn't have her, but she was our neighbor, Miss Flossie Lineberry. They used to recite scriptures, and she'd give them like Kool-Aid packets, wouldn't it? And we'd be excited because then Sandy'd bring that home, and then I'd get some too. But anyway, I used to think it was a lot if you could memorize the 23rd Psalm, but y'all, it's just 6 verses, But that was a long one if you memorize that. You wouldn't want to memorize, which was that long one. The one we had 2 or 3 weeks ago was like 100 and something. But anyway, all of us know it, but I know at different times at some graveside services, especially during COVID when we had so many graveside, we couldn't come in. We did the 23rd Psalm, and we'd be going to recite it, and it was on the bulletin. But you thought, well, what if I messed up, while we're saying it out here? But today, we just want to look at it and not just know it and not just memorize it, but actually feel it in our heart and feel what the words of it has to say. Our book starts out with talking about whoever the author or did our lesson, whoever wrote this, said that when they became parents, they remembered how they felt so kind of insecure, especially when you're a brand new parent, because the baby, it just eats and sleeps, or you hope it sleeps or whatever, but you just don't know because it's so helpless. And then, then you go through that stage where they want to do everything themselves, but it all messes up, and all that. I know when they first start to walk, it's hard because you just you go with them all the time to pick them up, and you love it when they finally get their balance a little better, but then they run from you, so it just never ends, really. But they were talking about that they had to, if they cried or did anything, well, you'd be quick to go to them. And I think about that on the farm. The animals don't talk, but if any of them make a different noise than what you're used to hearing, then you think, oh, what's wrong, or that kind of thing. And it's just true in our lives, but it says, the truth is that many parts of our lives are not easy to control. Our circumstances, our environment, our health. We cannot control the people around us. When we did not get our way, it's easy to slip back into our childhood self, the one who cries out for attention when needs are not met. And I thought about that. Can you think of a time this week when you didn't think your needs got met and you got a little bit mad? But it's sometimes when, especially like with us, because if you're with young children, or y'all have young children, and we're grandparents to young children. But, sometimes you think, now, who is the child? And whatever, because, they'll test you. And it's how we feel for the attention. But it says, the psalmist found comfort in letting God meet their needs. Now, we feel comfortable in letting, as children, letting our parents meet our needs. And then even if you're an adult with children, if you still got a parent, you feel like they take care of you. I know for Sandy and I, it's just been really hard to think that there's nobody taking care of us, so to speak. You know, I mean, it's just, you think about it in that way once your parents are no longer here, you know, and so you just think about that. But it says they let God meet their needs, and we're thankful, and you're thankful, and all of us are thankful that we trust God to meet our needs. And our loving parents taught us that God can meet our needs, but we have to let God do it. It's up to us to let go. So let's start looking at our lesson. Some of the background talks about whether or not David wrote this one. It says in the Psalms, in several of them, there'll be a superscription, and this one says a Psalm of David. Now here you get into this English stuff, and I'm not the English major at all, but it says the Hebrew preposition behind the English word of can also express relation or direction. This means that Psalm 23 could be about David or dedicated to him. He may not have written it. That's what our commentary is telling us, or our book. But anyway, we think. I mean, I've always thought it was David. You know, just I don't know why I just thought that. But you know, this kind of points it out. A lot of times when you teach a lesson and you get this book out and you start reading them or get a commentary to go along with it, you think, well, I always thought it was like this, you know. And how many times in life do we always think, because that's just the way we grew up, that this is how it is? But sometimes maybe we're just not exactly right. But anyway, it doesn't matter, because this psalm is for all of us. And it's really a good guide for every day for us. And it's good for our hearts and our souls when we're uneasy and unsettled. And so let's just read it and see how it goes. The first verse, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. So it introduces a reversal. It says, whereas David had been the shepherd, if this is by David, he was a shepherd, and we know about that. You know, while everybody else went off to war, he was home taking care of the sheep. And you think, well, he got it out easy because he had to stay there. But he fought off animals to protect his sheep. It wasn't like where we got a good fence around them, you know, because they moved from place to place to place. And he was not... let's say, he wasn't protected from danger, but he had to protect them from danger. And he had to be brave. But he's saying, the Lord is my shepherd. See, he was a shepherd, but the Lord is his shepherd. And we think about that, and we know that the Lord is our shepherd too. And it says God is David's shepherd. And the metaphor of God as a shepherd is used often. And then, you know, later in the New Testament, then Jesus says he's the shepherd, you know, and we think about, we talked about even last week while they were honoring Pastor Farrell, that he shepherds us, and how comforting it has been with him and Miss Elizabeth here to feel their love and care for us as a group, and know that they're genuinely interested in our lives, you know, and all of us like that. It's just like going back to that analogy where children cry out for attention. We all want attention. We really do. You can't deny it. You can pretend like you don't, but you get to thinking and you realize you want someone to notice something or pay attention. And we're trying to learn, like Mel Viney says, that it's all about Jesus and forget our selfish feelings, but still, we need to be cared for, and that's the shepherd. That's where the shepherd comes in. It says the psalmist does not feel the need to tell of any other people to take care of him or anything. He focuses on the relationship between him. In other words, he's not saying, the Lord's my shepherd, where I just talked about us as a collective group. If it was me, I'd just say, the Lord is John's shepherd. You know, but I'm saying ours because we're studying this together. But he didn't. He says my. You know, I just think about it because, I'm sorry, I had to just this is just my daily life with Miller right now. Everything's mine, and it's so hard. It's still so hard for him to share things. And no, that's mine. And like somebody will come over for kinder music, and I'll say, well, let them play with it now. You can play with it all week, but it's mine, he'll say. And so here, though, isn't it wonderful to be so possessive with God, because God is mine. He is our God, and he's our Father, and he loves us. And aren't you so glad that you have that? Because in this crazy world, if we didn't have that, I don't think our outlook would be anywhere near the same. I just don't. But anyway, he's focusing on just himself and the shepherd. And, of course, he was familiar with providing for all the needs of the flock. And the sheep, because, they're more domesticated, had to have more care, than like a bird that's out here in the tree. It takes care of itself, But they had to have care. And it says, however good David may have been as a shepherd, the psalmist depicts God to be all the more mindful of caring for him. And he says, I lack nothing. Wouldn't it be good if you, how we always say, well, when I get this, then I'm going to do that, or whatever. Aren't you always planning ahead? I asked Doug how many projects I've just laid out that we could do. But what if I said, everything's good, we don't need to do anything else? He'd be glad. But, that's just our personal way that we are. But if God takes care of us. We don't need anything else. We don't need people. We don't need to have to worry about what's going to happen this week or this year, because God is going to take care of us. That doesn't mean that we may not go through hard times, but we still know that God is the one who's taking care of us. And so he says, I lack nothing, not a thing. And so the good shepherd, it's hard, like if you have animals to take care of. I know for us, well, if we're going to go somewhere, we got to figure out who's going to do this and who's going to do that, and that just worries me to get it all straight, and I think, now, did I remember to tell them? I tell them how many scoops of feed to put it. Why don't I just say, just feed them? That like that. But, if we neglected those animals who depend on us, then something might happen to them or whatever. And God never neglects us. It said a bad shepherd could be far away when the need arises. Like if he just didn't go out there and move them or whatever. But it says a good shepherd is not distant. And then our book says God is not distant. He's not. God is not distant. Let's look in 2. It says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. Now, if you've ever, if you got a pretty yard or if you got a farm, if you got good green grass, you really are happy. Now, that's just a happy thing, I'm going to tell you. And to know that you got one in the summer, we rotate our cows. And they move from this one to that one to this one. And we say, now, I wonder where we're going to take them to next. Because we want to be sure that we've got a good place for them. And see, God does that for us. Sometimes he leads us in places that we resist going to. We don't think that he's got our best interest in heart. But he does. And that's why it says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He don't take you to some old barren dust bowl, where you wouldn't want to lay down there. But just, how good a thick green grass feels if you're walking in the yard. Our front yard don't have it because we got so many trees. But, when you get in some good grass, I like to walk barefooted in some good feeling grass, don't you? But in the pasture when we go and it's just lush and green, like if any of you had the army worms, you know what we're talking about. You don't want that. You want a good place to take them. You don't want to just take them anywhere. And God wants to take care of us. And he makes us lie down. It's just a relaxing thing. Have you ever been somewhere and you say, man, I just like to lay down here and take a nap. Have you ever said that? I have. Sometimes we just want something that's peaceful and it feels good and it just gives us peace. In 2b, it says, he leads me beside quiet waters. Now, it says in our book, it was talking about the imagery of a quiet water rather than a bubbling brook. Now, when you go somewhere, I like if when we go to the mountains especially, I like to go where I hear the creek running. I know after the storm that brings a whole different feeling. But you know, you hear the little trickling, and we have Little Creek, and we're on Little Cedar Creek, but it has to rain a lot for the water to come through up from Big Cedar down to Little Cedar. And when it does, it's so fun, because then we go over in the pasture and take the kids, and then the water's going, and we make boats out of sticks and stuff, and, you know, you hear it trickling down. And it's just a peace. But this says it's quiet waters. It's not making any noise. In other words, it's saying maybe that it's just a place to help the sheep rest. Because if y'all have ever been around sheep, they just get scared just so easy. They're not like, you know, if you dog, you'll just pet it a little bit and it'll stay right here. A sheep, if you just go, it'll run. It just goes. They're very flighty. And this is a peaceful thing as the sheep, for them to be beside this. It says, also in our book, it says, fast flowing water was not common in this land where they're speaking of. It says another way to understand the image is to take the word quiet, and that's a place of rest. So it's just to reinforce a place of rest where the sheep feel free to lie down unthreatened, where we have peace. You know, like you say, I want to lay down at night and just know that God is taking care of me. But a lot of times night is when we're the most restless, aren't we? And if you wake up during the night thinking about something, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then in the morning when you get up and start walking about your day, you think, why did that bother me so much last night? You know, because we don't rest. And this image shows that you could rest, that you would rest. And it's very hard for us to rest sometimes. We stir up so much of the turmoil in our own lives. We do. And if we would just give it to God and let him have it, we could rest beside the still waters like it's talking about. It also had brought up this point that the shepherd leads the sheep instead of driving them. Now, if you've ever tried to run some cows, well, we have to run the cows out, drive them out, you know, of a certain pasture if we're going to move to another one or whatever. But the sheep, like our sheep are like this. There's going to be one of them, and if we open the gate and we're going to move them somewhere else, one of them eventually will come out. And as soon as that one goes, they'll all just fall in line. But, you know, they don't just come, I believe I'll come in a minute. No, they either go all at once or not. They do tend to herd together. But if we're led by the shepherd, just like we talked about Pastor Farrell leading us in the ways that we should go here, that we can have impact on others. And our shepherd, God, leads us, and we follow him. He don't say, get on, you know, he don't drive us. It's just like why he gives us a choice. He gives us a choice whether to follow him or not, but he don't make us do it. He doesn't make us do it. He gives us that choice. And that's the imagery it's showing here. Let's look in 3. It says, he refreshes my soul. You know how it is when you know, like maybe you've worked real hard and you just go get you a cool drink of water or something. Or, you know, like sometimes you've had a really busy day, and then when you lay down, and maybe you put clean sheets on the bed that day, and you lay down and you say, whoa, that just feels so good. You know, so just think of anything to you that seems refreshing. That's what it's talking about here. It just helps us. It restores us when we've gone through some upsetting times or whatever. You just get refreshed. It says, he guides me, in 3b, he guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. So he's still leading, he's still guiding, and he takes us on the right paths. In other words, he don't take them somewhere dangerous, or he don't lead us somewhere dangerous, although sometimes we feel like it. He leads us on the right road, and for his name's sake. Do you ever remember your parents saying, now, you know, you need to uphold our name or whatever? And you kind of tell, you may not say it exactly that way, but when you tell your children how you want them to act, you don't want to hear about them acting a different way, because you'll think, well, man, that was Pam Hussey's boy that done that. You don't want that. You know, we don't want it to be that way or whatever. We want the name to be upheld, and that's what he does. But by leading us in the right way, there won't be any dishonor if we stay in the right way. So that's what he's talking about. It says, a faithful or righteous shepherd, as God is, leads the faithful of the flock into right paths. God proves to be faithful. it is not his nature to be otherwise. And y'all, we know that if we want to trust and people that we love and care for and that care for us, we put our trust in them. But as humans, we fail, but we know that God does not fail. So he is faithful, and it is not his nature to be any other way. In verse 4 it says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Now, it's so good to know God is with us. Think about, I know so many of you have probably prayed and thought about the Wallace family this week and their baby, because all of us think about, when someone's sick in our family, we do. And we think about them and how they trust, and they're, I say they're very young. To me, I remember them being little. I remember Madison being little, and you think about that and think about how they're saying, we're trusting God. They're saying, we're praying for God for just this breath that he's taken. Maybe he took 2 or 3 breaths that day on his own or whatever. They're trusting God. They're praising him for the things that God can do, and they know that God is faithful and with them. And this is a dark, dark time for them. Many of you have been through dark, dark times. All of us have. Times that we just think we just can't get through it, But we're still not afraid even as we go through it, because God is with us. And we all know that. I know that every person in this room this morning knows that God, you've heard it and heard it, you feel it in your life. We know that God is near. And it says, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Now, when we're put to the test, really, of something dangerous or evil happening to us, I don't know if any of us ever stood. I think about, when I was little especially, they'd talk about it, and I'd think that somebody was going to shoot us for saying we believed in God. And then we thought, oh, that'll never happen. And now we wonder, maybe it will. We don't know. But if we trust God, no matter what we have to face, we know he's with us, and that's what he's talking about. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And God is with us, and I don't think any of us doubt that. But we want to make that stronger, and that's why this psalm is so good, and it's 6 little verses that you can just put in there and keep with you, and just bring one of them out. This might be the one we pull out the most. I will fear no evil. I don't know which one we'll love most, or do we just feel refreshed and we know he's with us. But it says a Christian there's no promise that a Christian will not have to endure valleys. It's quite the opposite. And there's verses in Matthew chapter 10, verse 22. It says, let's see, you will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And, you know how it is when you think somebody hates you? We just hate that, don't we? And a lot of times we just try to gain that person's favor. And but this is saying that he don't say it might happen. He says you will be hated in Matthew. And then it goes on to another verse that tells us to look at is in Hebrews chapter 13 in verse 5. And so there it says, keep your lives free from the love of money. And, a lot of people twist that around and say, you ought not to have much money because that's not good. No, it's just that you don't love it is what it's saying. But it says, be content as we're refreshed and calm, like the psalm is saying. Be content with what you have because God has said, never, this is the important part of this verse, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So never 2 times. That puts it in that verse 2 times. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And it says, so we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? In October, I I like to pick these verses and because it makes me do it. And I find them on Pinterest or somewhere. I'm not smart enough to come up with it myself. But the October was fear is a liar. And so many of the verses were, I will not be afraid. God is with me. And we know that. And we just say it over and over because it's true. And that's what it's talking about here. We have the promise of God's presence even when we go through these dark valleys, as it's speaking of in 4. And then in 4b it says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now we know those are tools of the shepherd. You know, you think about everybody wanted to be a shepherd because you get to carry one of them shepherd crook things, you know, and you thought that was pretty neat. But, you know, if you use that like they did and you bring it down and try to pull them back in, because they are hard to really catch. Sheep are. I mean, when they're babies, they are so pretty and they're just precious. But you got about 2 or 3 days there where you can get them, and the rest of the time you just ask Macon. We run all over trying to get them, and you just can't. And you want to hold them so bad because they're so cute. But they run and they're flighty, and you need that tool when you think about them trying to get them from one pasture to the other the way they used to have to do. You know, they need those tools to get them in there. And we all know that our children are more secure if we keep them in a safe spot. If we don't let them wander out there, you know, we got to pull them back in. And that's why it's a comfort, because they know that. You know, that's why they say children need structure. They do. Because if you give it to them, then they don't have to wonder what's going to happen or if I can do this or that. They already know they can't do it, so they don't have to worry about it. You know, and they need that. They need those parameters to help shape them as they're growing up. And the same thing with the sheep. He tells us we've got rules in the Bible that tell us how to live, and we got to stay in that structure. So that's how we're comforted by the rod and the staff. You know, the discipline part. In 5, it says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And it says now, instead of it more like a shepherd or a sheep, as he's been talking about himself like a sheep, now he's saying they're sitting at a table. Well, that's quite now it kind of switches over to a human side, doesn't it? Because, you know, we know animals don't eat at tables. But it says the shepherd imagery seems to have given away to something new. God is now depicted as a gracious host who has prepared a fine meal for the psalmist to enjoy. And, you know, we talked about, and the preacher's had it in some of his sermons and lately and in the lessons we've had where David was hiding and all this. And he had all these enemies and he had, you know, he was trying to run and all this. And then it says, you make me a table and I sit right there in front of all my enemies. So nothing, in other words, I can sit here and eat and enjoy it because you're going to take care of me, God. You are. It says it's impossible to say whether the psalmist has particular enemies in mind. Perhaps it's just the literal foes, which we all, you know, as we're talking today, we don't know a certain person that might be against us because we're a Christian. I mean, you might. But it's just a general speaking that when it says they will hate you in the Bible, you know, that's kind of just a general thing. But we just know that we may be persecuted because of our faith in God, but we must uphold that. In 5b, it says, you anoint my head with oil. And it says, in the Bible, it's customary, if they were a weary traveler, it was a way to soothe them and to put this oil on their head. And it says, Jesus brought it up when Simon the Pharisee hosted him for dinner, and he didn't do that. And Jesus said he didn't. He called him on it. You know, but it says the psalmist also intends a double meaning. He may be recognizing David's physical anointing to be the king over Israel, so it could have that meaning. But it says, either way, God was a hospitable host with all the trappings of the grand meal which he prepared for him, and then he anointed him, which was a thing they did then. I know I read a thing about sheep one time about how, if these flies get up in their nose, they put oil on their heads to keep them away. And also during the season where the males might fight each other, if they put oil on their heads sometimes when they butt each other, it'd sort of slip away instead of hurting each other. The shepherd might do that for the sheep to protect his flock. So there's another imagery there with that. But in 5C, it says, my cup overflows. You know, if you just think like, it just can't be any better. We already said we lack nothing. If we go back to the first verse, you lack nothing. So then your cup just overflows with anything that he heaps up on top of it. You know, just better and better and better. It's kind of like how Preacher Farrell keeps telling us that we're going to go to, you know, we pray that we'll go, and we know if we receive Jesus, we'll go to heaven, and how great heaven will be. He said, but we need to be enjoying it right now. We need to enjoy the abundant life that God gives us here on earth, and he's talked about that, and we need to get that in our lives so that we're saying our cup overflows with the bounty of the goodness that he gives us. So now as we go on, it's talking about, it says, when there may be times of scarcity, but our God occasionally gives us an overflowing cup. And the overflowing cup was given when God sent his son into the world to save it. It says, when times get tough, we need to think about that. And then 6 is a verse that we all like to say. What was that man's name? I mean, I've just forgotten it. That they used to like to go sing this song to. Thurman. Surely your goodness and love, surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. And he liked that song, surely goodness and mercy. But this is, you know, if we just think about this and we think about how God has taken care and done all these things and we lack nothing and he's protected us from our enemies, then we look at this and say, surely, you know, that's just take that word over here and keep it over here, surely. And think about it. And then say, your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. And we believe that, and we hold on to that. And it says all of them, every single day that we live. However, how many of my life days won't be the same as yours. But every one of them, goodness and mercy will follow us, and love, if we have God leading us. It says God's goodness and love will pursue him all the more. He's talking about the psalmist. And then 6b is the best part. And I think about this that day when I was talking to Norris. And it says, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That'll never end. You know, once we accept him and have him in our life, we'll dwell there forever. And it says, you know, that is such a comforting thought on top of the rest of it. But the psalm gave us something all through our life to look at and calm us and keep us if we just trust in him. Let's look at our thought. It says, God has provided, is providing, and will provide. So there's no place left out there. We lack nothing. Y'all have a good week.